welcome back to Matt again. My name is Rampage and this is going to be a video talking about the Uncharted 4 inclusion patch. I don't know what you would call this, but basically they allowed the player to enable or disable motion blur. Now, there's a few things that I really need to discuss about motion blur here, but I'll get into that when I get into the game. But basically, the developer, Naughty Dog, allowed the player to enable disable motion blur intensity. Now this time around they went with an intensity slider rather than, in Uncharted Nathan Drake's collection, they allowed the player to enable or disable motion blur via objects or environment. Now, I'm saying that now because I need to elaborate on that further. Okay, story. Alright, so my issues with the game thus far in relation to motion blur is probably down to this specific mission because I feel like it is a blurred mess. Now, there's a few things as to why this could be the case. It's either prominently caused by motion blur, it's probably caused by the motion blur that my monitor's giving off, which isn't the case for most PC games running at 60 frames per second. So there's that. There's also the fact that the game may or may not be locked to 30 frames per second or not keeping up to 30 frames per second in this specific area, which means that the extra, once you remove motion blur, the extra frames that are missing aren't there, and you see them when you're moving around. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a sec. So basically this is motion blur set to 10, right? Just to confirm your thoughts, it is set to 10. So I'm going to take a screenshot whilst I'm doing this. Now I'm not going to, move around the map or do any of that bullshit. I'm just going to do this. Save the screenshot. I can already see the blur. Okay. And there we go. That's what motion blur looks like, set to 10 in Uncharted 4, right? So, okay. Naughty Dog, if you expect a player to play your game and focus on a specific person in motion with an image that looks similar to that, keep in mind that once you start moving around a bit, it does happen a lot more. How do you expect anyone to focus on shit? Now, granted, I have an issue with motion blur, so I'm one of those people that are like, fuck you and get rid of it. But, after a month, 2 months, they finally got rid of it. Or allowed the player to get rid of it. Now let's see if it is actually removed if we set it to 0. Display. Put that down to 0. And it doesn't really save, so I'm going to go back into it just to make sure. Display. Yep. I'm going to check if there's any other sort of settings that they may have added. No. No. Camera controls? No. And no. Alright. Okay, so this is what motion blur looks like when set to 0. Now, in the video, you'll probably notice that it is still blurring the distance. And if you can't, well, I'm sorry, but it is. If you say otherwise, that's fine. Give me a reason why you don't think it's blurring. Because I think it's blurring. Either it's blurring or this weird artifact. And it's not artifacting, let's be real. It's mainly blur or sort of semi-stuttering. But it's frequent enough to not be considered stuttering. And that is I just believe that the frame rate isn't constant 30 when I move or pan the screen. And that is a problem. Why is that a problem? Because that's why motion blur was added. To simulate that effect, but, sort of blur those missing frames together. So yeah, in all honesty, yes, the motion blur is removed. I'll take a screenshot of that. So you'll see that the motion blur is now gone. But I don't know, dude. I just feel like the distance, when I'm panning around the screen, that the distance doesn't have any focus anymore. Like, there's focus around the ground here, but the focus, I believe that the focus changes when the player pans the screen, or the frame rate is inconsistent. And those two things are probably prominent in this area. Why? Because there's a lot of fucking weird details and all this other stuff. But with that said, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'm interested to see your thoughts on this, and whether you think that I'm right about this, whether it's got something to do with the inconsistent frame rate, or whether it's got something to do with, I don't know, focal length, or render distance, I believe the developers call it. Something like that. I don't know, it just looks and feels like it's still blurred to shit when I move. Is it just me? Like, if I move like this, it's fine. Or, ish. It still has a slight blur to it. I don't know. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. My name is Rampage. Please don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.